Security guards of Reddit, what is the craziest thing you've seen through a surveillance camera? I worked at a hotel and we had a group of college kids come ask us if we had security footage of the pool area between 3 to 5 a.m. They were all excited about it, so we pulled it up. They had put something in the lock on the pool door so they could get in later. We didn't care because they were checking out anyways, but at around 3 a.m., you see them sneak in, and about 30 minutes later, they started a drunken belly flop competition and wanted us to tell them who won. One of them did about 5 perfect belly flops in a row. I'm talking no fear, great belly flops. We told him that he won and he raised his hands up in celebration, got a funny look on his face and ran outside to puke. I have yet to see a more perfect belly flop, yet alone 5 of them. Story 2. Not a security guard, but I'm an RA for a residence hall at my university. There was vandalism in my hall, and in order to find who did it, my staff, looked at the security footage of that hallway. The vandalism was a hole in the wall, about knee, hip height, so it was safe to assume someone kicked it in. And we had a general time frame of when it happened, so we were looking for someone to come up and kick the hole in the wall as we watched this footage. Well, we see 2 young men walk into frame, appearing to be in some sort of drunken stumble. They stop to hug each other and continue to kiss and make out and touch each other. Then things escalate. I should note that this hallway is at the far end of the building, furthest from the main entrance, and it was approximately 4 a.m., so they had privacy on their side. Anyway, dude number 1 yanks dude number 2's pants down and starts to BJ. Dude number 2 loves it. He turns around so that dude number 1 is on his knees with his back against the wall. At this point, dude number 1 is going at it, like really itching his throat with this thing. Dude number 2 is into it too and starts ducking dude number 1's head a bit. Then he humps more and more until he's ducking, pounding dude number 1's head into the wall. A hole appears, then grows with each consecutive thrust, and naturally dude number 1 passes out below the hole that his damn head just made. This guy damn a dude's head into a wall. Dude number 2 cleans up, covers himself, and slaps dude number 1 until he wakes up. Then they both walk out of the frame and out of the building. Our staff is mesmerized, and no one said a word during the entire viewing of this footage. The 2 guys could not be identified, and we believe they probably were here visiting friends. Who knows? College is weird. Story 3. I saw 3 casino floor waitresses go to a storeroom behind a bar, pulling their tops down and comparing breast sizes and feeling each other for bounciness. Apparently, one of them just got implants, and they were comparing them to the real thing. This went on for over 5 minutes, then they pulled their tops back up and went to work like it was nothing. Story 4. I once saw a guy try to push open a pull door and smack his head on the glass. He then looked around to make sure no one saw. I saw you, guy, and I laughed at you. Story 5. I'm not a security guard, but when I moved into the building I live in, we have a channel on the TV that lets you see the security cameras in the building. There are 9 of them in little squares. 1 is in the laundry room. I was here about a week and decided to check out the security channel out of curiosity. In the laundry room, I could see what looked like a man standing behind a woman who was bent over the sink. He was really ducker. I could see him moving a lot and floppy hair in front of him. I was shocked. What kind of place did I just move into? Should I take off my pants? Then something happened. The man moved out of the way. The long, floppy hair was attached to a very thin neck. Then it hit me. This was not some man ducking the crap out of a woman after all. It was someone trying to unclog the drain with the handle end of a mop. I still finished. Story 6. While working at a department store at the end of a strip mall, I saw a bobcat run past the doors, heading towards Target. Several seconds later, I saw a mother, father, and 2 children go running past in the same direction. A few minutes later, the family walked back past the doors, with the father carrying the bobcat. A big duck-off bobcat. It was kind of odd. And then this other time, I watched 2 people meet up in the parking lot. They both parked, then the guy got out and got in the gal's car with her. This happens a lot. It's almost always an affair. Anyway, what ensued was some of the most bizarre intimacy I've ever witnessed. She was a bigger gal, and when she unbuttoned her pants and lifted her shirt, I figured I knew where this was headed, but he never went lower than her belly. This grown man just sat there for a half hour, jiggling and jostling her massive belly, shaking and patting it. The strangest part, he didn't look like he was into it at all. He alternated between looking bored and horrified. I imagine my face was doing the same thing. About a half hour later, he answered a phone call and left abruptly. She buttoned up and drove off. I never saw them again. Story 7. Worked for 5 years in security at various locations in good parts of the city to crafty parts from government-regulated facilities to a factory. The weirdest crap I seen was probably the random damn chimpanzee that was walking down the street around 3 a.m. outside my guard shack. I live in Iowa. It was the first time I've seen a chimp outside a zoo. I called the police station that was down the street and went back to watching movies. I never hear what happened from that, but I learned I shouldn't ask too many questions. I'm not dying for $10 an hour. Story 8. I worked security in a mental hospital for almost 5 years. I've seen a lot of people pleasure themselves in their rooms. That's not too bad. Every once in a while, I would catch someone trying to harm themselves. The ones that creeped me out were the ones that would spend hours just standing in the corner of their room, not moving. Story 9. I worked security at a casino and a children's mental hospital, not at the same time. At the hospital, the best was a parent wailing on a psychiatrist's car with a bat because they didn't like that. He pointed out their anger management issues. At the casino, I saw a guy shovel $80,000 worth of chips into his underpants when the dealer turned her back. Story 10. I used to be a security guard in Kuwait. Let's just say the Kuwaiti National Guards did not know they were being supervised. One of the guards had their feet up in the window of his guard booth, so I sent out a supervisor to wake him up. Turns out, the guard's relief had shown up early and was giving him BJ. The supervisor walked in on them mid-act, but don't worry, the guards insisted they weren't gay. I love the Middle East. Story 11. I worked in a museum and had the head of security show me one of his guys, a supervisor doing his best to hop over the admissions desk. The guy didn't get enough air and landed squarely on the glass of the admissions desk. It shattered around him. It was pretty fantastic. Even better, it wasn't a move that he was pulling for some sort of security-related obligation, but it was after hours and he was trying to impress a new hire. Story 12. Every security department saves some of the best clips or clips that might be needed to use in future court dates or to protect them. Best clip I ever saw was a fight take place in a Walmart parking lot. It started with two women arguing, and that quickly escalated into a full-blown catfight. That wasn't the interesting part. Their two male friends started getting into it. One pulls a tire iron out of the back of his truck. The second quickly goes to his car and pulls out a golf club. They start acting like two gorillas showing how tough they can be. The one with the tire iron starts swinging it around above his head when it slips out of his hand and hits a kid who was walking by with his parents. By coincidence, the cops show up at the exact same time. They were pretty brutal stopping that fight. Story 13. My father is responsible for a handful of factories scattered around the country. He got a call one day from the security officer to come up for some advice. Apparently, there is a high school nearby, and a couple from the school had sex behind a large pile of munch that was on the factory property. While watching the live feed, Dad called the school and told them the situation. He watched while the principal interrupted them. He says that he's never seen anyone put on pants so quickly in his life. Story 14. I am not a security guard, but I work as a sleep technician and we use cameras for every study. Saw a 75-year-old man wake up in the middle of the night, rip the covers off to expose his junk, and start pleasure himself. It was like the last pleasure himself he would ever have. I spoke to him over the speakerphone in the room and told him this study was being video monitored, and he replied that at his age, you don't waste one. I turned the monitor off and let him finish. Didn't speak a word of it in the morning when I had to unhook all the wires. Story 15. I'm not a security guard, but I do have to review my hotel's security footage occasionally. One time, there was a fight reported in the halls, so I reviewed the security footage to see what happened. This huge guy threw this girl to the ground and booted her. She sat there for a minute, then got up and followed him to the room. They had already checked out when I reviewed this footage, so I couldn't get rid of him. What I did do was hand the tape over to the police with his name and address. Story 16. Retail security here, and I've seen some crap. The single weirdest thing was probably when a naked guy on PCP was being chased by police. He broke through the thick window glass on the driver's side of a Mercedes to evade capture. The officer said he didn't even flinch when he got tasered. I do a lot of theft research at my store, and while I was reviewing video for those gel bra stuffer things, I noticed that every single woman would check their bust size when they walked past. Not live, but I once saw a video of a security guy at another store, pleasure himself in his office. Story 17. Ex-security, I saw someone fall down on an ice patch and drop a Pyrex dish once. Security cams are pretty boring. Most of the time, we'd just replay any physical confrontations we'd get into. Story 18. Buddy of mine was working mall security. They got a call to the nail salon. Black lady ran up a big bill and said her husband, Lionel Richie, would pay for it. Yes, that one. Buddy has no training whatsoever and decides to cuff the 300-plus pound black lady. Gets one on and she starts screaming and slinging him around. He won't let go, so she bolts, dragging him along with her. The constable on duty was laughing so hard he was no help. They showed me the tape over and over and now use it as how not to do things for new hires. Story 19. Doing a stroll through the parking lot of a factory, I was a guard at once. Noticed some commotion in a vehicle, so I shined my flashlight into the window. I busted Manager A with Manager B's wife. It was slightly awkward. Story 20. I saw a dude go into a women's bathroom late at night. He was in there for at least half an hour, and this was at a college, so I went to see if he did anything. I go in to find blown-up condoms on all the faucets. It made me giggle, so I left them. Story 21. I worked in a prison as a guard, and we recorded the video using our cameras there. So this guy was working on a video monitoring at around 9 p.m. when he saw something moving out in a nearby cornfield. He pans the camera and zooms in on it and sees a black dog thing walking through the cornfield. Then as he is about to pan the camera back to its original spot, the thing stands up on its two hind legs and sprint across the cornfield towards the tree line. I called Bees, but since the video monitoring saves all its feed for 30 days, I was able to watch it during training with the guy. Story 22. The vast majority of the time, it's all boring stuff, but two things stand out while reviewing pub footage, more gross than weird. 1. Saw a woman in a short dress shimmy over to the end of the bench seat she was sitting on, pull aside her underwear, and crap on the floor. All the while sipping her drink and talking with her friends, she stayed there for around 20 minutes before moving on. 2. Another lady one night was performing sex on a male patron in a back corner. Stop suddenly, vomit, wipe her mouth off, and then continue to perform sex. We would usually check our cameras when we found vomit. Crap in the bar area in the hope we could identify who it came from and stop them at the door the next time they tried coming in. Story 23. Someone was in a horrible accident and was rushed to the hospital. Upon being notified, all the family members showed up. The patient wasn't in good condition, and doctors relayed to the family that this person was not going to make it through the night. The family was a wreck. Everybody was sobbing uncontrollably, understandably so, as their world had just been turned upside down. All the while, a hospital security guard watched on camera as the father went around consoling every hysterical member of the family. He never shed a tear and remained calm the entire time. He went from person to person, tending to them, putting his arm around them, hugging them. This man was an anchor to the others, and he knew it. He kept his head up while reassuring everybody things would somehow be all right. Now this went on for hours. The father's disposition never changed as he watched his entire family in anguish. Eventually, he left the group and began walking through the hallways of the hospital. Hospital security guard followed him on camera until he turned into a vending machine room and just collapsed. His hands moved toward his face as his legs gave out, and he sat there in a puddle of his own grief. Story 24. Not a security guard, but I frequently review video for situations that happen at my work. I'm one of the most adept people in my building when it comes to using our camera system. We had a situation that happened outside of our building that needed reviewing, but nobody was sure of the exact time. Cue to me watching a 12-hour block of footage with as much as 16x fast forward to get some details. I had my boss's boss in the office with me while he was working on something else as I stared at the computer monitor, trying not to fall asleep. After half an hour or so, I finally spot the person I'm looking for and get excited, so I lean forward right into the screen, scouring for previously unnoticed details. Right at that moment, a spider ran onto the camera lens. Keep in mind, the recording I was looking at was days before when I was watching it, and the camera was outside on the opposite side of the building from me. That didn't stop me from screaming so loud I could probably have been heard outside, causing the boss's boss to jump on his chair as if there was a cartoon mouse in the office. When I tried to explain it and rewind the video, I couldn't find the spider again, and he just thought I was insane. He always looks at me funny when he comes by to visit our building. He interacts with thousands of people in my same position all across the country, yet he remembers me for screeching about a spider that was never anywhere near me. Story 25, current security guard here. Saw a sphere-like UFO hover above cars in the parking lot, then flew around trees, over the field, then to the back of the building. Minutes after, I saw another sphere-like object on the internal camera floating upstairs and out of view. I was freaked the duck out. The week after, I reviewed the footage again and realized the first sphere-like object was a balloon, and the second one was a dust particle. I was freaked out because I watched an alien documentary just before that occurred. Story 26. No, not a security guard, but I was shown the footage of me doing something incredibly stupid. It was a book signing for the band JLs. I was working as a shelf-stacking technician at the bookstore Eason's in Ireland. My job for the day was to usher the screaming girls from the band signing area once their book was signed. Now, when I say there was a lot of girls, I mean a lot, like a good 2,000 girls, all queuing up to get this book signed. Well, I saw the top few people in the line. Funny enough, the first person in line was a guy. When it came time for signing and JLs entered the building, the hat near blew off the house. Anyhow, the first guy walked up, screaming, and got a kiss off each band member on the cheek, then proceeded to faux faint on the floor, right beside the queue. This in turn riled up everyone, and everyone was screaming and fainting for the next 4 groups after. Each time I had to help them up and tell them to leave quickly, to which they jumped up and were out. I was not having a fun time. Then there was this one girl. In retrospect, I should have seen the signs, but I was too angry and whatnot. Anyhow, this one girl walked up by herself, white as a sheet. She gets a peck off each band member, and whilst walking towards me, she face plants the floor. I mean, full on, no reserve, straight up headbutts the floor full force. I'm just standing over her with my arms crossed like, yeah, come on, get up. While my manager and 3 other staff members run past me to help her up from my feet, she passed out. She had really fainted. The security guard must have rewound the tape 1,000,000 times to show just how much of a banana head I looked, while laughing uncontrollably, standing over her with my hands crossed as everyone around scrambles to help her. Story 27. A man opened his trunk, pulled out his pocket pussy, and went to town. The open trunk blocked his view as guards approached the vehicle, so he was all in when they made eye contact. Story 28. I work bouncing at a bar some, so I've seen tons of crap on the video from the night before. I've seen two dudes double stuffing a chick in the back bar. The door was locked, so one of the guys used a credit card to pop the lock. I've seen many substances deals and hundreds of tits. But the weirdest thing was my ex-wife to BJ a dude off and looking at the camera. My buddy told me to watch it because he knew she did it to piss me off. It didn't work. I just showed all the bartenders and waitress. Story 29. Okay, we didn't have cameras, but I used to work security at a hospital. I got called to a room to handle a crazy patient. It was an old woman. She was probably 65 pounds soaking wet. She wanted her to smoke. I showed up to a pretty good scene. The nurse was trying to explain to her that she couldn't smoke in her room because she had oxygen tanks. Also because it's a damn hospital, and that's probably not good for anyone on the floor. She then started accusing people of stealing her smokes from her purse. They had been removed when she was admitted. She got it in her head that the nurses believed she had hidden smoke somewhere on her person and commenced to scream, "Search me! Search!" while removing her robe, showing everyone her 65 pounds of gross. I'm just standing there hoping this all blows over. Oh, how wrong I was. She then says she is leaving fully naked at this point, and I'm having none of it. I just block the doorway and give her the evil eye. I had crap to do like play Angry Birds and sleep. I wasn't about this at all. She realizes her escape attempt has been thwarted, and no crap. Looks at the nurse and says, "You better stand there all night because I'm damn leaving." I was pretty peeved at this point and told her she needed to get her narrow ass back to her bed and quit bothering these nice women who were doing their best. Her face was so defeated I almost felt bad. Then she went back to her bed, still naked, and called us several horrible things before going back to sleep. So that was my first day at the hospital. Story 30, not a security guard. But I used to work retail and was buddies with loss prevention. Got a phone call warning me to not shake hands with a customer or touch what he touched because he was itching his balls for a solid 10 minutes while walking around the store. Story 31, not a guard. But when I was in high school working at a grocery store, I got called in to watch a video at loss prevention. It was a coworker of mine who walked down a whole aisle, looked around, jammed his hand up and down his ass crack, then sniffed it and went on like nothing happened. He didn't know he was on CCTV. Story 32. Not a security guard, but my father owns a self-service car wash, strip mall in a crafty part of Las Vegas. We had CCTV cameras to make sure people weren't vandalizing or stealing crap. I've seen a lot of escorts ducking clients in the car bays and homeless face first in our trash searching for crap. It was pretty active at night. The craziest crap I've seen was an addict ducking the car vacuum's hose. It was pretty surreal. So yeah, that happened. We had the cameras on for like 2 months before they were, ironically, stolen. Story 33. Work at an art gallery. One summer, they had an outdoor installation called Gumhead. It was a large bust of the artist that exhibit belonged to. People were, of course, encouraged to stick their used gum to it, and by the end of the exhibit, it was absolutely covered in chewed, rained on, heated up, and had birds crap on it. One night, I'm sitting in the security room when I noticed a guy pacing around the bust. I zoomed in on him to find that he was picking the gum off the bust and shoveling it into his mouth. I'll never damn forget that one. Story 34. Around midnight, drunk dude walks into an alley behind a building. Sleeps for 20 minutes. Wakes up, staggers around, stops and stares at a door, runs at door head first and knocks himself out. Wakes up, tries unsuccessfully to open the door, pulls door off, throws the door at it, then walks away. Story 35. Story from a friend who worked as a security guard. Their post was behind a one-way mirror. When you entered the facility, you'd see a long mirror on the wall and not know there were people behind it. One day, a job applicant arrived. She paused at the mirror to check for lipstick stains on her teeth, then reached into her V-neck top and adjusted her headlights to make sure they were evenly distributed. The guys behind the mirror nearly choked, laughing silently. She ended up not working there, so clearly the guards had no influence in her. Story 36. I had just started working at a new job at a Fortune 500 company when they opened their new corporate headquarters down the road and thus transitioned security over, and then the rest of the staff. It was loaded, and then some with security cameras, most of them being full PTS and night vision capable with 30x zoom or greater. The camera room also had a video wall where you could take any of the 1,000 cams or so and go full-screen video wall with it. I worked night shift with about 3 other guards, and we rotated between patrols and camera, dispatch duty. The guy on my rotation with me, let's call him Mike. Damn it, his name is actually Mike, and I haven't worked there in 4 years, so I don't give a damn. Anyway, Mike was quite the stalker. He had a keen eye for anything out of the ordinary when shuffling between the many cams. Now I am just outside the camera room at the dispatch, service desk, kicked back and watching Netflix on my phone since night shift is pretty boring minus the occasional piss-drunk trespasser lost on their way home after leaving a local bar. So I'm deep into the middle of binge watching Me 5 and I hear the cam room door open. Mike yells for me to come there. He has to show me something. I pause my show, hop up, and head over. I open the cam room door to find Mike has the whole wall set to a single cam, that being of the IT storage room. Why the whole wall? I didn't ask and don't care to know, because no matter the amount of alcohol and no matter how hard I try to forget, what I saw on that screen can never be unseen. It was some 30-year-old IT dude was working late and had apparently forgotten the extensiveness of the camera system, as he was with one of the nighttime cleaning crew ladies, a 50 years young, who looked like she was on substances her whole life. She had him bent over and was ducking him with a broom handle. Admittedly, I feel kind of bad for the guy. I do know that he ended up quitting after he kept coming into work to find a broom in his office. One of the other guards, of whom I'm almost 100% sure it was Mike, kept putting one in there to let him know we knew. I, for one, never patrol-checked that storage room again, nor did I ever touch another mop or broom, etc. in the place. Story 37? Worked at a coffee shop, but through our CCTV, we watch a bloke have explosive diarrhea right outside the front of our store. This was in the middle of the night. He wiped his hands on the walls, then walked away like nothing happened. Story 38. I used to work for a company that did security for a university, but the university also had their own police. University of Toronto Campus Community Police. While working at a residence at night, one of the security cameras picked up someone going into a small stairwell to do some substances. As per our instructions, we called the U of T police to deal with the situation. When the U of T police arrived, we were following them with the security camera and watched them start going down the stairs. Suddenly, the camera turned and looked away, looking onto the street, even though I had not used the controls to do that. I turned to my supervisor, who explained that the U of T police had remote control of the cameras and they had did that. When the cops came back up, the person they arrested looked like he was beaten severely. He did not look like that previously. When I asked around later, the report said he fell down the stairs. Story 39. So there might be weirder stuff, but the most memorable that I recall is from my time working at an art museum. There's 2 of us watching the screens, and a couple of others who go on regular patrol inside the museum. But this time it was a slow day, and almost no guests. So most of the other guys were hanging around inside the guard room. Got to admit that we weren't exactly staring at the camera feed with the highest focus and attention that we usually do. But while I was sitting there, I noticed this old, 50-years-old woman who was walking around and watching some Dutch paintings from a specific era that I can't recall. There wasn't anything particular about her. In fact, she was basically the epitome of our usual guests. But I noticed here because I realized we actually had guests inside and thought to myself, huh. After she'd passed around a corner, though, I noticed something was off. She suddenly ran out of the camera view but came back. She stopped right there and just looked around frantically for a moment. That's basically when all of us guards started paying attention to her. What she did next was basically drop down her panties, and squatted right next to these goddamn Dutch paintings and started peeing, as if that was somehow a sane option at all. My boss, who was assigned on the floor doing the patrols, let out a huge groan and yelled, "Oh, not again!" and then ran out like a lightning bolt. The 2 of us remaining noticed that when she was done, she had just put up her pants and strolled away as if nothing had happened. Literally, a second or so later, another guest came walking by and was admiring these Dutchy paintings, suddenly realizing she was standing in a damn puddle. I have no idea if she knew immediately what it was, but she kind of hurried away from the camera view as well. Then we saw our boss basically walking along with our peeing offender, carrying a heck of a lot of paper and some washing stuff, and basically pointed at the puddle and gave her the washing stuff, and she seemed to, without protest, to begin washing up, and then left. Apparently, she'd admitted immediately, though, without any explanation that she did it, and was more than happy enough to wash up after herself. She didn't seem particularly bothered or flustered, according to my boss. What he meant with "not again" was never explained, but life at an art museum is filled with excitement such as these. Story 40. Would have a be the mid-50-years-old guy who was completely naked and covered head to toe in tattoos doing helicopter spins with his junk for a solid 5 minutes. Story 41. I used to work at a video rental store about 12 years ago. Large chain, hundreds of stores. This happened in the district near mine. The district manager comes to one of the stores one day to do some back office work and decides to check the security cameras. He randomly picks a day a few weeks before and pulls up footage of 2 employees going at it on the back office desk, the one at which he was currently sitting. He immediately calls headquarters. They send in a team to investigate. Turns out there was a guy and a girl that worked at the store who decided to hook up in the office one day. What followed was an occasional trip to the office to romantically engage every time they worked the same shift. After a week or so of doing this, another employee randomly walked in on them. Instead of freaking out or ratting on them, the third party joins in. A couple of days later, they get another person in on the action. This continues and eventually avalanches into almost the entire staff engaging in sexual activity in the back office. The whole time, there was a security camera in the office. No one ever thought to cover it up or delete the videos. A couple days later, the employees come in to find corporate replacements and a "now hiring all positions" sign on the door. As each employee entered, they received their termination papers and their final paycheck. No explanation was given to the employees who were fired, as corporate decided it was best to just clean house and try to forget that this ever happened. Story 42. Not security, but I worked at a storage center and we had about 20 cameras and I've seen some stuff. The one lady we had was so disgusting. Always smelled like garbage and literal crap. Well, one hungover Sunday, I look up at the camera and see her casually walking down the hallway, crap pouring out of her ass. Another time, I come in at 8 on a Sunday and there is an old RV taking up all the spots in our parking lot. Looked like Walt's RV from Breaking Bad. The door was open and the inside was full of adult cassettes, dirty underwear. When me and the cops went to check the tapes, we see this guy in his mid-40 years old pull up frantically in the RV at 4 a.m., slam on his brakes, and take off into the woods in a full sprint. He was wearing a suit. We never found who it was. Story 43. It wasn't through a camera, but rather while I was making rounds at the rice mill I worked at. Occasionally, they'd shut the mill down for fumigation, and we could volunteer to do security overnight so we didn't lose our hours. So, I'm alone with a keychain full of keys and a flashlight walking the fence line behind the mill next to the railroad tracks. They loaded rail cars with rice. When I hear this ungodly squelch sound, I figure it must be a late-night train passing by, but I see no lights to indicate that I'm right. As the sound grows louder, I can see a dark mass rolling down the tracks, shooting sparks from behind it. Kind of freaky. I think so I decided to hide behind a stack of pallets to be safe. Finally, it's close enough I can see. It's a train engine with 3 tanker cars, all unmarked, and all the windows on the engine blacked out. Then I hear someone talking. To make crap even stranger, there are 2 guys standing on the railing of the last tanker in radiation. Suits, spraying the sparking wheels of the tanker with what I guess was water. Ran back to the guardhouse and called my supervisor. He told me not to worry about it and let him sleep. Oh well, freaked me out. Story 44. Not something I saw, but what I did. I was doing a perimeter check of the B lot, went off to smoke substances. As I was lighting up and inhaling, I looked up and saw a security camera that I'd never seen before. It caught me red-handed, and I was extremely nervous. When I nonchalantly walked back into the control room, I casually asked about the camera behind stage 3. My boss said it hadn't worked for a while. Then he pressed me about why I had asked. I eventually told him the truth, and he didn't care. Gotta love a security guard job. Story 45. I work at a school district and was doing camera maintenance. Passed by a camera with someone flipping it off while she was giving some guy a BJ in a stairwell. I called the campus cop and told him. His response was, "I know." This dirty little ducker was watching it on his monitor. Story 46. I don't know where these other security guards work, but the most interesting thing that happens around the factory I watch over at night is a spider has made a home in one of our camera housings. She likes to wave her arm around the lens of the camera, and it looks like she's stomping on cars in the parking lot. Then she'll come out to eat every once in a while. That and the ghost in the IT room that keeps shutting off the lights in the hallway right across from the IT room. Every once in a while, at night, the IT room door will open a little bit, then the lights will shut off in the hall. Gets always send me to turn it back on. Story 47. Actual security guard here. I gotta watch this one with my own 2 eyes. There was a guy meandering down the highway outside the guard shack. Since I was busy with truckers, I didn't pay him any mind. Then, an old lady pulls up and asks for a little help loading her son. I can't since I'm dealing with trucks going in and out, but a site worker tries to help her coax him over. It took them about 20 minutes and threatening to call the cops till he grudgingly got in his mother's van. This guy had to be in his 30 years old, and it was a riot watching this all unfold. Story 48. I'm not a security guard, but I used to work at an assisted living in Colorado overnights. Someone had to always be sitting at the front desk where there was a monitor with all the cameras on the first floor patio areas and back loading dock area. We would have to keep an eye on it all night to be sure to let the night owl residents who would go outside to smoke back in. One night I was looking at the loading dock area. No residents ever had access to this area. It's locked with a code going in and out, or can be unlocked from the front desk, which I was sitting at. It was around 4 a.m. and I saw what looked like a man walking up the ramp onto the platform and just kept walking straight into the building. I didn't ring him in, and the only other person there with me working was sitting in the lobby where I could see her. The loading dock door is right around the corner of the lobby and desk, and we didn't see or hear anyone actually in the building after I saw them walk in. It was one of the eeriest things I've ever seen. Story 49. Not me, but my coworker who had the weekend shift. I got to see the recording of it afterwards. I guess some drunk Canadians got into our part of the building somehow from the hotel as we had just closed it down. The guys are probably 20 years old. They're laughing, stumbling everywhere. And then all of a sudden they start throwing water coolers at each other and from the second floor onto the first floor. They all go down to the first floor, and at this point, the escalator was still on, as it wasn't too much past closing time. All of a sudden on the screen, one guy decides to ride the escalator while hanging from the side of it. Once he reaches the top, Drunk Canadian has nowhere to go, and he falls off from the second floor. Drunk Canadian is laying on the floor and looks dead, and his friends surround him. He's moving a little bit. My coworker goes out to see what the heck is going on. Drunk Canadians reassure they've got this. My coworker goes to get an incident report form. Drunk Canadians pick up their drunk Canadian friend and lift him out of our part of the building and back into the hotel. We have no idea what happened to them after that, but the video is forever saved on our work computer. Story 50. From Singapore, I was told of this story through earlier batches of guard duty troopers in our military airbase, where we do surveillance of the fence line to seek out intruders. The troopers actually saved the video, and that's how I was able to see it. The video showed a discrete part of our fence line, which made it hard for the occupants of a certain car at the skirts of the gate to realize they were next to an airbase. An elderly couple were sitting there in that car in the early hours of the morning. The lady takes out a bao, a traditional Chinese breakfast food, which is a steamed hungry with filling. They shared it and ate it together after they ate their breakfast. The lady, who seems to be in her 60s, starts giving her husband a BJ. Yeah, story 51, not me, but my uncle is a transportation director at the local school district. They have security cameras on the buses, BTW. Anyway, they received reports of a particularly rowdy group of kids on the bus one day, and he pulled up the video feed to see a guy sticking his thumb through his fly and proceeding to fake pleasure himself. He couldn't show me, though, because of privacy reasons or some crap. Yep, story 52. I was working security on my old job site because we had a series of overnight thefts, thousands of dollars of equipment stolen, power tools, generators, pressure washers, my boss's computer. They even took a damn box of nails. One night, I was doing my rounds of the job site, and I heard these coyotes whining in the distance. Not unusual. The site was on the edge of farmland. I did a lap around the excavation and was heading back to the office trailer when the hair on the back of my neck stood up. I turned and swept the area with my flashlight and saw 3 sets of eyes maybe 15 feet behind me. I didn't turn my back and run. I just yelled, "Get ducked!" and they scampered off. I got into the shack, wrote up the incident, and proceeded to look up how to make a nylon bullwhip. Story 53. Mall cop here. Many things, most of which cannot be unseen. One incident that comes to mind right away was an elderly male fingering a girl right outside a main entrance. After he finished up, he licked his fingers clean. Bonus. Witnessed an elderly female getting into the passenger seat of a truck. She tripped walking off the curb, fell on her face, lost a shoe, and her wig flew off. Bonus 2. Raccoon somehow found its way inside the big U of Best Buy on the outside of the building. I remember it being very humid that day, so animal control was called. Guy shows up and uses a ladder to get on the roof. As he gets close to the raccoon, it takes a leap of faith and lands on the street. It lay motionless until the guy picked it up and caged it. Got a call a few days later that he made a full recovery and was fine. Story 54. Worked at a mental health facility that was partly abandoned. Patients would sometimes get off on the vacant floors and wander in complete darkness. Saw a lady once that got off the elevator on the abandoned surgical wing. She was a repeat offender of this. Her name was Tay, and she had an affinity for putting feces under her fingernails and scratching guards when she was denied entry for mental health services. I watched her for a minute to make sure she wasn't going to bolt from that floor. She turned around in complete darkness for her, pointed right at the camera that had to be almost impossible for her to see, and then put her finger over her mouth in a shushing motion. She then sprinted down the hall and out of sight. I then had to go get her. I could hear her laughing and slamming doors in total darkness. Oh yeah, I worked third shift. Needless to say, I quit after 6 months. Story 55. For a while, I worked a second job as a security officer in a psych ward. One cold, unassuming night, I glanced over the screens and discovered a very large and combative female patient try to pleasure herself with the TV remote attached to her bed. Needless to say, that was an interesting radio transpontine. I felt so bad for the nursing staff that night and the housekeeper in charge of cleaning the room, including the remote. Story 56. So not me. But my coworker, he showed me the video. There was a group of stereotypical white teenage girls wandering around the store. He was keeping an eye on them because young folks in large groups. He sees one girl hand something to the other. Thought it was odd, but moved on. Not shortly after, one of the girls gets on her hands and knees like a dog. She had been handed a leash and collar and proceeded to be led around the whole store like a dog. Story 57. Not a security guard, but I work tech support. One day, someone put in a couple of tickets for broken registers and in the description put fire damage. Needless to say, I pulled up the camera system and sure enough, a fire broke out on the registers, and I see one guy swinging the fire extinguisher trying to get the fire out. Then another employee starts walking near the area, sees that there's a fire, and then starts to slowly walk away, backwards, like she didn't see anything. Story 58. Most of the really interesting stuff that I ran across during my career in security was during the 6 years that I worked at a really high-end hotel. Myriad weirdness was seen and snickered about, and it's genuinely hard to narrow it down to a single event. Things like BJ in elevators and quick sex in back hallways are fairly commonplace. Had a wedding where the groomsmen were given swords as wedding favors. One of the single most random events were a pair of women in their early 20 years old that rode an elevator for a while, stopping at various floors and accumulating random bits of furniture from the elevator foyers and nearby room service carts. By the time all was said and done, they had set up a table and chairs in the elevator, complete with a vase of flowers and a plate of hors d'oeuvres. Then they left. Story 59. I've been doing security for 13 years plus, so there are tons of odd things that I've seen via CCTV. The few that come to mind are pretty mild and fairly comical blunders. However, this has to be the oddest thing. A man sitting out front in a minivan waiting for someone. We notice he's sitting in the driver's seat and lifting his butt to scratch his ass. Well, it got weird when he stuck his arm down the back of his pants. I mean like past his elbow, where he remained in that position while fishing around for a solid 5 minutes. Then he notices something in the side mirror. People walking up. A lady with toddler and small baby in a stroller. He immediately yanks out his arm, pulls up his pants and refastens his belt, then jumps out and helps them get in the car, folding the stroller and packing the bags. As his wife is placing the baby in the car seat, dude looks at his nails and smells his fingers, then closes the hatch and gets into the driver's seat and holds his wife's hand with the same hand. Story 60. The student hall of residence I worked at kept having food stolen from the kitchen, and we wanted to know how they were doing it, as well as catch them. So we watched the CCTV footage of the dining area. A large blanket with 8 or 10 legs walks into the room. It stands real close to the serving hatch area beside the locked kitchen door and vomits up a person. They're a tiny person with their face covered. They climb onto the serving table, push up the security mesh just enough for them to slide under it, and open the kitchen door from the inside. The blanket walks in and proceeds to raid the pantry. Having successfully committed the perfect crime, the blanket and the small person leave the dining room area and head back towards the elevators. We switch to the elevator camera, where they take off the blanket and high-five each other whilst waiting for the lift, their faces all clearly visible. Story 61. Not a security guard, but I am a paramedic. We have dash cams on our trucks, and I saw footage of one of our employees napping in the back while his partner was inside the station. While he was napping, an addict stole the ambulance. After driving down the road, the employee woke up, went up to check if they had gotten a call, and saw the addict. He poked his head up front and said, "Hey, you can't be in here!" And the addict just about had a heart attack. He said he didn't know anyone was in it, and then opened up the door and took off into the night. Story 62. I don't have terribly cool stores, but earlier this year I saw a guy headed into a dumpster area across the property. I head on out there and confront him, and the dude was just bumming through the trash. As I have my light on him, he pulls a perfectly intact Sega Genesis out of the dumpster. For about 10 minutes, I forgot that I was supposed to make him leave because we were both so flabbergasted as to why someone would throw a perfectly good Genesis out in the dumpster of a vegan grill. I let him keep it at least. Story 63. I've caught people having sex numerous times. I worked for about 3 years in security in a variety of different settings, but mostly office buildings. I've seen people blatantly ducking in lobbies, bushes, elevators, freight elevators, and even in their offices. I was trained that if you encountered people having sex, you were supposed to approach them and first ask them if everything was okay. We were never to make the assumption that the act was consensual. The question would usually prompt the couple to quickly gather their crap and exit the premises. The strangest find was probably 2 people in Halloween costumes ducking in a parking garage. Both of them were extraordinarily intoxicated. The girl ran off while the dude struggled to stand and eventually passed out. I had to flip his ass onto his side in case he started puking. When the police arrived, he was naked from the waist down, drooling and groaning and dressed like a clown. Story 64. This wasn't on the cameras, but definitely scarring nonetheless. I work as a security officer in some college residency halls, which is just as awful as it sounds. Well, one night, I received a complaint about one of rooms being loud, not unusual at college. So I went up to the room, knocked on the door, but no one answered. As I let myself into the room, I immediately walked into a group sex of about 10 people. I stood there for a second, just as shocked as they were. Then when everyone realized what was going on, they all ran to cover themselves. It's safe to say I never officially reported that one. Story 65. Used to work at Sears LP in California. Had this kid always come in as soon as we opened and hide his scooter in the hardware department. Mental issues. Long story short, I was watching cameras one day and saw him fingering a mannequin and proceed to duck it really intensely for what seemed an eternity. I felt really bad for the kid. Also saw an old lady with a baby carriage, with baby inside, going up to the 3rd floor, get stuck and fall while the escalator dragged her to the top. Apparently, she was screaming the whole time. Luckily, the baby didn't fall out because it was the 3rd story. Don't bring baby strollers on a damn escalator. Story 66. A super drunk woman who diarrhea shat in a planter because we couldn't grant her access to a closed access building while she waited for a tow truck driver. The tow truck driver showed up mid-dump and told her he would not assist her unless she cleaned up her mess. So she waddled over to the giant fountain in the middle of the auto court, splashed some water on her ass to clean off the dingleberries, and used her coat to dry off. Then she walked back over to the planter and buried the crap like she was a cat. All of this was caught on camera. The tow truck driver can clearly be seen with his phone out, literally, while he recorded the whole situation. People who keep an eye on security cameras, what's the most bizarre, disgusting thing you have seen happening? Story 1. I do security for a large retailer. There's this guy who comes in all the time and just rearranges stuff. He'll put books in boxes and stack candles, stuff like that. Kicked a pair of socks underneath a fixture once. He'll rearrange something, stand back, and look at it with approval, like he's fixing up the store to completely random standards. Never steals, but one time he came upon a takeout drink cup that someone left on a shelf and, no hesitation, just picks it up and downs it. Had me laughing pretty hard. Story 2. I was a security guard for a couple of years in college and worked for 2 different companies. At one of them, I didn't have a fixed post. Instead, I would just be called in to sub for people who were out sick or on vacation, meaning I never knew much about the places I was working. One night, I get called to work at a large corporate campus that served as the headquarters for 2 companies and the State Farm Bureau. On this campus, there is a pond. In this pond, there were often a bunch of whole Canadian geese. On this particular shift, I was working with one of the regular guards at that location. He went out to do his rounds and left me to watch the security cameras. This is well after hours, so nobody should be in the parking lots except the cleaning crew. I notice a small car pull into the executive lot, and an old man gets out. He walks to the trunk and pulls out a giant plastic tub. He tips the whole thing over, and it has to be at least 30 gallons of dog food. He gets back in the car, drives to the other side of the lot, and waits. Soon, all these whole geese swoop in and start eating the dog food. Old guy watches for a bit, then leaves. The entire time, I'm recording the camera feed and taking still pictures, confused. I grab my work phone and call the other guard. I explain what I just saw, and he excitedly yells, "Oh, damn! You caught the goose guy!" Apparently, this guy had been regularly coming to feed the geese every night. The longer he fed the geese, the more of them showed up. They had been damaging the grass on the property, crafting everywhere, and attacking employees for months. But nobody could ever catch the goose guy in the act, or get a license plate number. The weirdest thing was, there were plenty of public parks close by with plenty of geese for this guy to feed. I have no idea why he chose the executive parking lot of some company as the ideal goose feeding location. Story 3. Dozens and dozens of bike thefts, never could make it outside on time to stop them, but I damn well tried. Woman trying to take her life away by walking into traffic repeatedly. Made it outside and stopped her until police arrived. Fellow employee who was accused of smoking substances on shift. No substances use policy, and vehemently denying it. Pounding his fists on the table, screaming at us, threatening legal action. Directly after the meeting, he went outside, around the corner, and smoked substances under a camera. There were a crapload of blind spots outside, but he went right under one of the cameras he spent 40 hours a week watching. An extremely intoxicated man ripping off his clothes until his pants were around his ankles, then began doing karate moves and screaming. After a few minutes of this display, he put his clothes back on and then started dancing with a traffic cone he'd found. Quite a few office romances, affairs in the parking lot, best for last. We had a female security guard who was often late for the night shift. It was a Friday night, and 2 of us were eager for her to show up, and we were watching the cameras for any sign of her truck. Her truck drove up and parked and just idled. What the heck? We wanted to go home already. We zoom in and see a guy sitting in the driver's seat, obviously not her. Check the plate, definitely her truck. And what's going on? Suddenly we see her head shoot up out of the guy's lap. Oh boy. She gives him a kiss and comes inside as he drives off. We turn to each other, and I say to the other guy, "Shut the duck up and never speak of this to anyone." This guy was a douchebag and would bully everyone but me, so I had to stop him. Nobody deserves to be mocked for a common sexual act, even though it was in a somewhat inappropriate place. She was just being a good girlfriend to her guy, I guess. He just nods. She comes in, says hello. Other guy hurries out without a word. I give her the shift report and I'm about to leave, and she says, "Hey man, have you got any mints or some gum?" It took everything in my power not to crack. I managed to say, "No, good night," somehow. Story 4. I work on CCTV over a large town center. The other day, I swore I saw a chap carrying a large fish. No bag, no water, just there in his arms. We zoomed and followed, definitely holding a massive fish. Where the heck has he pulled it from? It's 11 p.m. on a Thursday night. He's not wet either, so the stream that runs through the park isn't the source. We followed and notified police, who arrested both and released the fish into the stream of the park after they chucked it on a car bonnet. Turns out the little duckers had slashed a temporary tank which was currently holding over 50 fish. 45 of which died from where they decided to empty the tank where the pond was being cleaned and pumps replaced. Glad I spotted him even though the police were making several puns and jokes over the radio about fish. Story 5. Oh boy, okay. So I have a shop and it's part of a multi-unit building. Noticed this lady almost every day parking at the far end where I couldn't see her with the cameras after she pulled in. She would walk from her car to the dumpster at the other end of the building she could have pulled right up to and throws out a couple bags. Like, almost every day. It was an older lady, 55 years old, nice grandma-type sweater and pants, always nicely put together, jewelry, etc. I thought maybe it was a friend of the landlord that was told she could use the dumpster. I don't know. So we decide on a Tuesday if she comes after the garbage men, we will investigate. And we did. She threw out a McDonald's bag with wrappers in it and a Walmart bag with human feces in it. Yeah, major what the heck. I think she may have an eating disorder, but I don't understand why she doesn't use the toilet at McDonald's or Walmart. She's obviously there every day. So comes the WTF, do you do? My education and experience never prepared me for someone crafting in a bag in their car in my parking lot and throwing it in my dumpster. We thought about leaving a note with help numbers, and please don't use our dumpster. But could you imagine trying to tell a nice old lady that? Or being stuck in that life and finding that note? So we just watched. Maybe it would stop. Eventually, she started coming only a couple days, then not at all. We feared Poop Lady died. But lo and behold, she has started coming back 1 or 2 times a week to stock our dumpster with rancid human poo. Yeah, what the heck? Story 6. I did video surveillance for about 6 months. The most bizarre, disgusting thing I saw besides the typical break-ins was a woman stick a laptop down her pants, walk out the front the door, and come back for more. About 3 hours later, employee found out 3 or 4 laptops were missing. The other was an employee who opened the store, walked around eating junk food for a bit, and sat down and thought about what he would do next for about half an hour. He simply sat still for about 30 minutes before unplugging the DVR and making off with several computer components as well, a couple laptops. Weird part is, soon thereafter he went rock climbing and slipped. On the way down, he hit a rock and hit his eye. He called the owner asking for forgiveness, and if there was any way he could pay for what he stole. Odd, to say the least. Story 7. I managed an office building. The designated smoking area was the loading dock. We had one of those pole ashtrays with a big base that you dropped your butts in. I'd come in some mornings and the thing would be open. I checked the video and found it was 2 guys and 2 girls about 15 years old. As soon as the sun went down, they would run up on the dock, open the ash dump, pull out the longest butts they could find, and light up. As I left one evening, I dropped a couple of full cigarettes in the thing. The video showed them open it up, grab the smokes, and start jumping up and down like they hit the lottery. Story 8. There was a Santa convention downtown. A homeless man was trying to use an ATM and was failing badly. A few Santas were getting upset, and the homeless man punched one of the Santas, knocking him out. Then some Santas tackled the homeless guy and waited until the police got there. Story 9. Was watching video looking for people sabotaging pasta in the factory. Saw tons of things. Women on night shift taking coffee break right on the factory floor, sitting in a circle playing poker or something else, and doing shots of alcohol. Guy who sucked at driving the forklift crash it numerous times into product. The walls and the best was when he drove a fork through a garbage bin. He spent maybe 5 minutes getting the thing around trying to shake it off. Then 10 or so minutes trying to catch the side of it in a doorway so it would slide itself off and kept smashing into the wall randomly. Then eventually guy comes into frame and yells at him, then takes like 10 seconds to pull it off the fork with his hands. A bunch of sick gits throw things into the pasta. I was looking for someone putting staples in. Instead I caught a guy who would spit in the big boxes every time he walked by one. Many people sneezing into product. More than one worker who would sweep product that fell on the floor into a dust bin, then toss it back in with the good product, along with any dust or whatever else was picked up from the floor. And a dude took off his rish and threw it into one of the boxes, which I thought was the stupidest and made no sense. There was a midget dude and one of the old ladies took a giant box and snuck up behind the guy, then caught him it. Story 10. My brother used to work for a pawn shop that was super small. I mean no larger than 500 square feet in the actual shop, not counting the storage. He showed me camera footage of a rather large black woman going down the tool aisle and shoving several loose tools inside and then walking out. They didn't pursue charges as they didn't want to touch the tools. Story 11. So I used to work in an apartment complex. We had a pool and a gym area, and we had cameras all around to check up on things. Well, one day, we were just scrolling through the camera footage from the day before. We usually never check it, but we were looking for something little. I can't even remember what it was because what we ended up finding was so much worse. So we're scrolling through and our pool closes at 9 p.m. so there's not supposed to be anyone in there till 5 a.m. the next morning. Well, we see a lot of activity in the timeline around like 2 in the morning, so we go there to check it out and bam, immediately in perfect view of the camera. Is this guy just like ducking a girl on the floor like nobody's business? We just sat there in shock. Eventually, we scrolled through to try and see who he was, and we watched him finish. Both of them get up and get dressed and walk into separate bathrooms without saying anything to each other. So he had gotten an escort, somehow got into the pool. Don't know how, because you need a card to get in, and it was blocked because of the time. Did the dirty with her on the floor, right smack dab in view of the cameras, and left. We finally found out who it was, and my manager had to call him and tell him to never do that again. It was quite a fun time. Now, whenever he came in, we'd be like, oh crap, it's the guy. Story 12? I work for management in a shopping center, and a few weeks ago, cleaners spotted human feces on the floor outside of a shop. We looked back on the cameras, and the crap had fallen out of the pants of an elderly man. He didn't even flinch, just kept walking, and out it came. It was sad because he was clearly incontinent, but there was a little bit of humor to it too. Kudos to the cleaners for having to clean it up, and feels to the guy who stepped in it twice. Story 13? I worked as a loss prevention agent for quite a while when I went to college, and we had this one sick git who looked like he could be a clone of Ron Offerman if he were a heavily bearded trucker who weighed around 290 feet. This guy frequented our stores, going back and forth to all of them, which were all around a 20-mile radius, when people were around him shopping. He would sneak women's lingerie and underwear into his cart, while acting like he was shopping for the men's department, since both sides, men's and women's, kind of merged into each other at certain points. He usually showed up about 1 hour prior to our closing time, and if there was no one shopping around him, he would go straight into the women's underwear and lingerie area like he owned the place. Once this guy was satisfied with the women's lingerie and underwear that he had picked up, he would make his way to the fitting rooms, which were not monitored, except for loss prevention by camera. So he could pop out wearing the lingerie, and then begin a game of hiding amongst the clothing racks, while twirling his nipples with his fingers. He would go all over the store, playing with his nipples with his fingers, and he would go hiding in the clothes racks while wearing different kinds of lingerie and women's underwear that he had picked up and changed into while in the changing rooms, and he would move around the store when no one was looking and then pop out and stare strangers down while playing with his nipples, and then sometimes moving on to his junk area with his other hand. Then he would sneak his way back to the fitting rooms, using the clothes racks as his own personal camouflage, then come out and just leave with what he was wearing when he walked into the store. I informed my boss about the situation, and he wouldn't let me take the guy in even though he was costing the store a lot of money. My boss informed me that a guy matching the same description had started showing up a couple days before, all over the area in different stores, and was pulling the same crap with lingerie and women's underwear and rubbing his Johnson. So for one entire week, always around the same time, my boss made me and another LP agent at another store that this guy frequented and did the same routine, track, and take video of this guy for a week straight. Oh, and yes, we made sure to definitely get rid of all of the lingerie and underwear that this guy put on. Finally, I had about 3 hours of video of this guy sneaking around the store doing all of this freaky crap while wearing things that left nothing to imagination. The guy was finally apprehended, trespassed permanently from all of our stores, and then arrested when the police showed up. All the while, that guy was wearing see-through black nylon tights that he had taken from the store along with a leopard pattern lingerie top. After that, we never saw him again. Story 14. Used to work at a court as overnight weekend security. One night around 1 a.m., a man came up and started wiping stuff on the front door. We thought it was ashes from the cigarette garbage things outside. When my partner went outside to tell him to leave, we discovered he was wiping his crap all over the front door. The worst part is, he only noticed when he turned around and grabbed the door handle to come back in. Story 15. Not a security guard. And this wasn't first seen on camera, but was caught on camera and then watched multiple times. When I worked fast food, there was a guy who ordered whatever, and as we were handing his food out the window, a shoeless Asian kid ran in between his car and our takeout window and snatched his bag of food. We got the guy some more of what he ordered plus complimentary ice cream, and we were all just astounded at what happened. My one manager starts laughing from the office because she happened to see it on camera from in there and she was replaying it. By the next week, every employee had seen it, and the district supervisor had even watched it on a surprise visit. Like I said, not really caught on camera, but we had the ability to watch it over and over. Story 16. Used to review overnight footage for a hotel in FL. One night, around 3 a.m., a couple decided to have sex in the maintenance stairwell. Random dude sneaks up on them, wet willies the man's butthole, bolts and proceeds to just leave the hotel. Wasn't even a guest. Story 17. I used to work for a pizza place in a not-so-good part of town. A pretty bad stuff. The most bizarre thing I ever saw was the mascots randomly moving around at night. It was very strange, and got scary when they seemed to decide to move towards my office every night. This happened about a week before the place closed down for good due to sanitation issues. Story 18. I saw a guy scoping out the place to see if he could rob us. He was checking the burglar bars, the alarm, the cameras, and the register. He was probably on Met and looked kind of scary. I was the only manager, storefront employee there, So it frightened me because I'm a short, thin girl and knew that I wouldn't be able to stop him if he were to try and attack me to get to the register. After a good 10 minutes of checking the shop out, he left and never came back. I also saw a homeless guy take a huge crap in front of the entrance, then proceeded to use a leaf to wipe his ass. Story 19. My first real job was for a local grocery company in it. As part of this, we sometimes were pulled into security investigations. One of the stores was missing a large volume of cigarette cartons. So the security guys set up some hidden cameras in the stocking area to try to catch the culprits. We did not catch the thieves, but did catch an ex-NBA super macho guy giving a BJ to a much smaller, super effeminate guy. Story 20. I worked in a security monitoring center years ago, and we had cameras set up all over this housing development. There were 8 houses in total, and one night, 3 cars pull up and numerous people get out and go inside. They are walking out with bags of installation, etc. This is 1 a.m. We call the police and let them know. The police arrive with 2 dog squads and let the dogs loose in the house. Dudes come flying out of everywhere, and even 2 dogs are attacking 2 people. The other was very recent. Our female manager ducking the cleaner for prescription meds. Story 21. I watch traffic cameras. I don't know if these qualify as bizarre or just plain out of the ordinary, but over the summer, my coworker spotted smoke on one of the cameras. Flipped it around, and we immediately saw a car engulfed in flames. Did the proper procedures for lane blockage while watching the firefighters put out the fire and the resulting cleanup. One of the cameras is focused on a low railroad bridge. One night, an Amtrak train must have hit a small piece of debris on the tracks because it started sparking like crazy. Think welding sparks. Watched as the train conductors realized what was happening, slowly backed off the bridge, and then slowly go over the bridge again, this time with no sparking. Story 22. I am a security specialist for a financial company. I've caught most of my disgusting things at our corporate center. Things range from catching people picking their nose and wiping it on the buttons in the elevators to being drunk outside and peeing on the side of the building. But one incident took the cake. One afternoon, for no real reason, a guy caught my eye walking into the corporate center. He had some crazy brown hair and balding at the top, white wavy pants and a loose button-up shirt, and a look of terror on his face as he stepped lively through the door. Being curious, I decided to follow him on camera. What I was about to see shocked me. I didn't have to wait long to see him walking slightly behind a worker. As the worker got just far enough ahead to turn the corner, I saw our odd friend reach towards the back of his pants. He rolls them down ever so slightly, and out came 2 perfectly round pieces of crap. Then he just walked away like nothing had happened. As I sat there watching this camera in shock, I started to watch people walk past the poop and not even notice it. A girl on her phone just missed it with her heel. A guy with a rolling work bag missed the crap by an inch. It was that most heart-pounding moments of my job. Until one girl finally saw what was on the ground and had to do a double take like, wait, is that crap? Later on, I caught our friend walking back out the door and haven't seen him since. He will forever be my mad pooper. Story 23. I work in assets protection for Target. Witnessed a service dog crap on the floor in the middle of a main aisle. Watched the owner clean it up with cart wipes. It was weird. She seemed so calm about it, like it happens all the time. First and only time I've seen a service dog crap in the store. Story 24. In school, I used to work loss prevention at Best Buy. 2 years straight on Black Friday, a little girl would go back to small TVs and take a dump on the base decks while her parents wait in line. We made a code for it on the radio after it happened the first time. I had to wait a while year to get to use it, but man was I glad it came full circle. Code brown to home theater. Story 25. Middle of CBD, a man in a black robe and an anonymous mask stood in the middle of the street holding a brown bag with a bottle in it, I presume contained liquor. He then pulled out a craft knife in a very dramatic way and hit both his wrists going up, not across. He survived. A few weeks later, saw him on cam again, same area, same mask. Tracked him until the police hijacked the cam and said they were tracking him. They had remote access. Story 26. I work at an office, but I sit at the front desk where we openly show camera display. Walked by and decided to pause and look at the cameras. Little old lady hobbling by with her walker, and I thought, well, that's adorable. She stood up completely straight and started digging up her dress. I'm horrified. Then out comes a 2-liter bottle of juice or soda and a large bag of chips. She then went back to old lady hobble. Story 27. Worked in a block of flats for a few years. Seen a couple having sex on a staircase. A man having a crap in the car park and numerous fights. One time, a man was being assaulted by another man he lived with. I went up and broke it up and asked the victim if he wanted me to eject the ducker. He said no, but I still escorted him back to the flat. Later, I seen the victim running up the street. I called to him and brought him into the hut, as we called it. He said him and the fella who had attacked him earlier had both gone to bed after the fight. They slept in different rooms, but he awoke to find the perpetrator on top of him. He claimed he was abusing him and punching him, phoned the cops, and sat with the victim until they arrived. They arrested the assailant, but the victim withdrew his complaint a few days later. Claimed he was drunk and was talking C. He was never right after that, though, and has always seemed very anxious since. Bit of a mental place to work at times. Story 28. This happened while working at Target. Lady's kid throws half-eaten chicken wing on the floor. 2 minutes later, lady winds up in the same spot, picks up the wing, hands it to Junior, and he continues eating it. Story 29. Not me, but brother-in-law. A man leaves something in an alleyway, go out and start a fight outside a nearby club and start leading said person to said alleyway. A man hiding behind his car, pleasure himself at people as they left a roller disco. A man steal a pigeon. Story 30. I work at a hotel in a decently sized city. Not in security, but I did review the tapes. We have a large installation art exhibit in town at the moment, and there are sculptures all over town. We reviewed footage of a girl who was maybe 5 feet 5 inches drag a plastic sculpture of a 6-foot-tall coyote into our lobby, and then demanded that a bellman bring it up to her room for the snaps. We told her it was a local art piece, and she needed to please put it back. Story 31. This wasn't me, but in high school we had a speaker come in who watched security cameras in a prison. The one she found the most comical was of a specific prisoner who was known to duck with cops. Apparently they have these isolation cells for prisoners who just feel like being gits that day, and this dude was put in there for whatever reason. So while she's there, she's looking at him with his arms inside his jumpsuit. This guy would put his head in occasionally and then take it back out, and with his arms in the whole time, and after a few minutes, she called officers to go check what was going on. When they got to the guy and opened his jumpsuit, red liquid went everywhere. Apparently, this dude thought it would be great to hit his own junk. Story 32. I worked at a grocery store in high school. Was reviewing security film with my manager at closing one day. Typical procedure for people that were closing, just to make sure there wasn't any theft. That particular night, we saw a guy pleasure himself to a Mrs. Butterworth container of syrup. Story 33. When I worked as third shift in a hotel, the cameras in our hotel caught pretty much nothing. In the conference center we were attached to, the houseman goofing off was pretty funny. And then sometimes, the chandeliers would sway at night and picture frames would be tilted. I never caught the movement on film, but after I locked the whole building, someone would adjust the furniture. I fixed a picture frame one night, and the next morning it was moved again when I unlocked the place. Story 34. I don't keep an eye on the cameras, but the other week I saw an old guy walk right out of the front of the building, completely naked while sleepwalking while on sleeping pills around 1 a.m. Story 35. Okay, so I live in Canada. The winters get really cold here, so most cars have block heaters that you plug in to stop the engine from freezing up. It plugs into the mains with a standard plug that lots of people leave hanging out a bit from under their car's hood. So anyways, I was working night audit at a hotel and keeping an eye on our back parking lot. This guy was wandering around and I was worried he was scoping out cars to break into. Turns out what he was actually doing was every once in a while shuffling his pants down, taking the block heater plugs and shoving them up inside. After a while of me trying to figure out what the heck this dude was doing, I called the cops and they came and got him. Talked with a cop after who couldn't stop laughing. Apparently this guy had done this before. Story 36. I used to work loss prevention for a fairly large privately owned supermarket. I would rotate between 3 different stores, and without fail, in at least one store at least once a week, someone would casually crap their pants and shake it out of their leg onto the floor while they were walking. Poor maintenance guys only got $2 coupons for having to clean up logs of crap weekly. Story 37. I worked at a fuel station at a big supermarket for some time. The best thing I ever saw on the cameras came on Christmas. The whole place was shut for Christmas, and I was in first thing the next morning. Upon driving into work, there was a car smashed into a pole right in the middle of an empty parking lot. My coworker and I pulled up the CCTV footage, and you can just barely see this area. You can see this car Christmas afternoon come flying around the corner of our empty parking lot and bear straight into this light pole. Then you see this woman get out and just stare at the front of her car without moving for about 10 minutes. Shortly later, her husband pulls up and you can just see him going, "How damn did you hit the only thing in the parking lot?" It was pretty great. Our theory she wanted gas came flying around the corner and was looking at the building to see if we were open and then smack. Story 38. I was on the mezzanine above the vending machines, sat at the front desk, eating some popcorn, watching a film, when I look over at the camera to see some bloke knobbing his missus up against the coffee machine. I shouted down, "Go on, son, get in there!" The girl pushed him off, and they left. I was pissing myself laughing. Running a 24-hour library at night was glorious. Story 39. I saw a guy come into his company's break room about an hour before the other employees were due in. Apparently, he was not aware there was a camera in the room, because he immediately pulled out his tablet, pulled up some adult film, and started going at it. The camera was located behind and above, so I got a pretty good view of everything, whether I wanted to or not. The footage was emailed to the business owner, but I'm not sure if Spanky was fired or not. Also, people, pools often have surveillance cameras monitored at night. So when you and your honey decide to sneak into the pool area for some adult fun, be aware that you just may have an office full of bored security staff critiquing your performance before dispatching the police. Story 40. I'm shocked at how many people I see crapting on the ground. It's a grocery store. We have bathrooms. Some just crap while they walk and shake it out of the bottom of their pants. This one still confuses. Are you not wearing underwear? How does a turd just slide out? One guy picked it up and put it on a shelf with his bare hands, then kept shopping like it was no big deal. Story 41. Does it have to be on camera? Here's another one from a buddy who works downtown on an upper floor. One day he goes out for a smoke break. The patio overlooks a bus stop, which is right beside a school playground. On the bus stop bench, at like 11 a.m. broad daylight, mind you, he sees a dirty guy on his back with a dirty woman on top, doing the nasty. Suddenly she stops, says something to dirty hobo guy, and gets off. She then squats beside the bench, takes a big steamy dump, and then climbs back on for more dirty sex. Story 42. Recently saw a young guy follow women and watch them for almost an hour. Wasn't shopping at all, just watching them from afar and following them, checking them out when they weren't looking his direction. He looked high and it was really worrying. Two of my coworkers followed him outside and warned him not to wait for any of the women, which looked like his plan. Could have been being paranoid, but he wasn't shopping at all. Just finding young women to watch until he settled on this tiny Asian girl and watched her for a long time. Story 43. Not security, but figured I might add this here. Years ago, working at a pizza place, me and another coworker were standing at the registers on a busy night, and the manager was standing behind us cutting up pizzas. The front door was tinted and it was dark outside, so when a guy with a bike came up to the door, without opening it, and stood there staring inside, my coworker and I shamelessly stared at him before slowly realizing he had one of those skull scarves covering his face. The guy must have been put off by our staring, the couple of people in the lobby waiting on their food, and took off. It freaked us out and we talked about what to do if he came back. He didn't, thankfully. Story 44? Not mine, but my sister shared a few interesting ones from when she worked security, loss prevention, technically, at a grocery store. He advised to me, don't buy the bulk food. After seeing the number of people who scratch their asses, cough in their hands, or pick their noses, and eat it, before rummaging bare-handed in the bins, she won't touch the things. Also, apparently stuffing containers of high-grade steaks down one's pants is a common thing with certain thieves. They'll then trade them to dealers for substances, etc. So apparently, some dealer is eating a T-bone that's been down some sketch's pants for 15 minutes. Story 45? As a security supervisor for one of the biggest pharmaceutical companies, I saw quite a few things, but never anything really bizarre. Sex I saw 3 times in like 3 months. A dude giving a BJ to another dude, a gal riding cowboy on a guy, and another chick who had her top off in her car. The one that sticks out the most was when 3 hot girls, on a Friday night, went to the corner of one of the buildings we worked at, and we have them on video all taking off their pants, squatting, and peeing. We all sat there and watched it a few times together. Story 46. I didn't keep charge of them, but I was in the security room while this happened. A lady and a guy, most likely her husband, came into Kmart. They went to the cosmetics section and apparently felt like stealing lipstick. The lady was very creative, though. She didn't just put them in her purse or pocket. She decided to hold the lipstick, reach up her skirt, and shove them up inside. The way she was moving made it pretty obvious she wasn't just lodging them in her underwear. This lady was actually shoving lipstick inside while the guy stood in front of her, glancing around every so often to make sure no one was coming. Story 47. A former student of mine monitors security cameras for a large municipal cemetery. He told me that one time, on an early evening, a young couple teens went behind a mausoleum and hid from the camera. Still, he knew what was going on behind the vault with the bones. Story 48. I work security at a senior citizen building. I had this one chick get knocked out by her boyfriend over a bus card. When the elevator made it to the lobby and opened, she got up and dipped out the building. She came back later that day and asked her if she wanted to press charges, and she said she didn't know what I was talking about. I showed her the vid of her getting knocked out, and she said to not worry about it. Cops were called when it happened, but they instantly hung up after telling us they can't do anything unless she called them herself. Story 49. We caught a dude stealing from our break area. We checked the footage after, and he went to our lockers, took off his shirt, and rummaged through our stuff. Took nothing of value other than a burner phone. Mostly stole pens, gloves, and pens be from lanyards. Story 50. My file has one of those doorbell cameras. During Halloween, he showed me a recording of a random woman who came up to the door with her kid and licked the camera, followed by a giggle, and walked off without ringing the doorbell. Story 51. The store just put up summer displays with surfboards from a local shop. Kid walk in the store dressed like one of the displays, swim trunks, Hawaii shirt flip-flops, and shades, and just puts a surfboard under his arm and walks through the store and out. Everyone thought he was adjusting the displays as they just went up that morning. Story 52. Thermal camera night watch. Watched 2 men take turns on a donkey for 90 minutes. It was not pretty, but it was wildly entertaining during a very boring shift. It confirmed rumors about nighttime activity on Thursdays throughout the country. And no, I'm not making this up. Story 53. I work front desk at a nice hotel. I was rewinding through the tapes to see if our janitor had put a certain hose away in a closet that was locked because we couldn't find it. As it was rewinding, I saw two people in the pool that looked like they were getting it on. Couldn't zoom in, but played it back for all my coworkers. Yep, they were having sex in the pool. Story 54? Working as a prison guard watching the isolation cells in the Netherlands, Cam comes up and switches away after 5 seconds. First pass, the guy is sitting on the toilet backwards. Little weird. Camera passes again. He's got his hand in the bowl. Oh dear. Another camera pass and there's crap drawings on the wall. Another pass, his bed. The walls are covered in nice, warm, fresh crap. I just felt lucky I'm not the one who has to clean that crap up. Story 55. I'm a concierge at a fancy downtown apartment and we have cameras all around the ground floor and outside. I'm mostly watching the back alley because trucks love to block it off and we have a parking garage entrance back there. I've seen so many people do substances I've lost count. Have had to call ambulances for people ooding more than once. Not really what I thought I was signing up for. Story 56. Caught footage of a ghost, as in someone with a blanket over them pretending to be a ghost every other Monday, sprinting towards a building and back. One time, he even slammed into the wall of the second building, the one he sprints to. Had a good laugh. The other guy told me that the ghost has been at it for years. Also a clown. Story 57. Worked retail loss prevention for a number of years. I once saw this dude perving around on female customers and employees. Any woman he saw with tight-fitting pants on, he'd creep up behind them and snap some ass-shot pictures sneakily with a camera from his jacket pocket. We confront his ass and deleted the pics before ejecting him from the store.